Okay, Mr Robbins, my media teacher.
Hello.
Hello. You've seen my trailer develop, so do you think it's improved, and how do you think it's improved?
Yeah, I mean, it's improved a lot, I think, over time. I think it's become a little bit more sure of itself as a trailer. I think for a while we had some very interesting shots, very interesting collection of images, but we weren't pulling the whole thing together to make something that sort of really functioned totally as a trailer in terms of addressing the audience and engaging the interest of the audience. So I think it's come on a pace in that respect. So yeah, very much so.
Now, do you think the genre of the film was clearly established of the trailer?
Well, it's interesting. I was at that time just viewing it then. I was sort of conscious of how I think it's quite clever potentially as a mix of genres. I mean, certainly in terms of the style of it and the sort of aesthetic of it, it's got a sort of art house alternative feeling to it, a sort of independent film. And in a way, the prize nomination thing at the end somehow underlines that and reinforces that. But in terms of the actual type of film that it's hinting at and teasing us with, there are interesting sort of gritty realist strand to it. But there's also a sort of sinister undercurrent, even elements of not quite horror, but sort of stuff that is perhaps slightly sort of chilling in a way, and I think it manages to carry that across too, which in terms of the marketing of the film might be a good thing, that it's somehow more than just a sort of gritty realist film. There's something in it too which hints at something perhaps beyond that. So I think, yeah, it's interesting from a genre point of view.
Excellent. What aspects and features did you think were most effective? For example, like editing or style of shots and things like that? Yeah,
I mean, I think the visually, the editing and particularly the way you vary the pace and you do those sort of arcade scenes are somehow the most striking, the most immediately striking. The images as well of Dawn sort of jumping in and out of the shot are sort of in a way surprising and therefore quite attention-grabbing in a way, which I think is important in a trailer. I think over time the editing also in terms of sort of pacing has improved, and there's a bit more of a sense of momentum, which I think is important. Recently as well, you've added those bits of diegetic sound, and I think those make a real difference. And so there's quite an interesting soundscape now. The music doesn't come in instantly, we get the giggling at the start. So I think you've worked well in that regard too, and I think it's now got quite a lot of different features all working together rather than sort of working against each other, which was maybe the case earlier on.
Okay, thank you. And you commented earlier about one thing you thought didn't work, and that was the music fading out at the end because you felt it lost impact. Could you explain that on camera for me?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of conventions, it seems to me that trailers quite often do what you've done, which is sort of leave an almost unnerving vacuum. You know, there's like a sort of, it just goes and the audience are left wondering and thinking, and it doesn't answer its own questions, you know, it's teasing you in that way. But I mean, at the same time, I suppose what I was concerned about was the idea that the trailer, having worked hard to build up momentum, suddenly, you know, the sort of bottom drops out of it in a way, and it you know, there's obviously another convention in some trailers where the impact at the end is really quite pronounced and quite spectacular. There's a big bang, there's a big noise, there's a big image. So I just wanted you to think, I guess, about where you wanted the trailer to sit in relation to those two possible ideas, and maybe even just to experiment with that, rather than being sure that one was better than the other. You know, that was all I was thinking.
Okay. Because I initially intended the silence at the end to be slightly uncomfortable or chilling. Do you think it didn't achieve this effect, or that maybe it didn't achieve it enough, or?
I suppose I must have thought that I wasn't sure it achieved it absolutely, otherwise I wouldn't have said it. But I mean, I was conscious that's what you were trying to achieve, and you know, I think that there are some interesting shots at the end. That, you know, the mirror shot is quite a nice way of tying stuff up towards the end, but it is a difficult thing to pull off. So I think by and large I'd feel quite confident about it, but there obviously was a little bit of doubt in my mind about how totally that had been achieved.
Okay. What did you think of the length of the trailer? Do you think it was an appropriate length for a teaser? I think it was about 50 seconds, is it?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so.
Awesome. Did the trailer sustain your interest?
Yes, and I think it has now in this sort of final cut, or wherever we're at with it now. This earlier I had felt that there was a sort of, like I think I talked to you, there was a feeling that it was operating on one gear, that it found its thread and then it just kept going at us. Whereas now I do think there's some rises and falls, there's a bit more to capture our interest, and I think as I say, the sort of slightly sinister feeling makes makes it come to life in a way, where I think if we'd operated on a much more straight realist level, we maybe wouldn't have had that. So all in all, I think yes, but it took a while, you know. But that's what it's about, I guess.
What did you think of the music? Do you think it worked alongside with the images?
Pretty good. I like it now not coming in at the start, because it's somehow more ominous when it does come in, and it's not spectacularly creepy or sinister, which wouldn't be appropriate. You know, it just has that undercurrent again of slight menace and slight unease that I think helps it. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, what did you think of the use of representation, like for example representation of drugs or young people and so on?
It's it's a funny question when you know the actress.
Yeah, doesn't help. I guess.
But I think actually, in a way, knowing the actress adds a dimension at least, which is that you're seeing someone in a very different light, and you're showing someone in ways that certainly surprised me as a viewer. And I do think even if I didn't know the main actress, I would feel that there's something quite unexpected about there is a sort of challenge in a way to the stereotype of the drug user, in that her whole look and her whole feeling isn't absolutely obvious.
Yeah.
You know, there is a sense in which she's sort of maybe a character who's gone off the rails and is not quite, rather than a character who's sort of fundamentally immersed in drugs and flawed and dangerous, or any of those sort of cliches.
And
there's something quite uncertain about the representation of her, which I think is quite intriguing. It's not too cliched, it's not too obvious.
Did you feel any connection or emotion for her?
Yeah, I think I do more now that I've heard her. I feel she's more of a real person.
Okay.
Where when you had the sort of the absence of diegetic sound, I think that she has come to life a bit more. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Robbins.
Enjoyed every minute of it.